Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Drew's Virtual Happy Hour. Happy Hour is designed to help us escape the pandemic as we know it, learn some cool stuff, and talk to some really cool people. And tonight is no exception to that. She is a former Gator, but of the San Francisco variety. She is a criminal defense lawyer. She is the VP of the Women's Lawyers of Sacramento. She is the 2016 IDP Attorney of the Year with the plaque to prove it. And lastly, to me, most importantly, she is an importer of fine wine from France and Italy through her company, LBV Imports. Kelly Babineau, thank you so
Hi.
much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. You really did your research.
I
Was surprising.
I pride myself on the page 9 Google search.
Yes.
So yeah, I got to see some cool stuff, and the respect that I'd already had for you for everything, the fact that you have a day job and then you also do like this really rad project, at like moonlighting as an importer. I was just like reading some of, your cases and things like that. And I was like, this is some heavy stuff. Like, oh my God, no wonder she loves wine so much.
Right.
But yeah, I do like to get a couple of those little tidbits in there. And anytime someone wins, kind of a obscure award, I love to mention that because
That's so cool.
It was great. So, so for you, where does the love for wine really begin? And that's what we want to start off with.
Oh, that's a good question. So as you referenced, I went to San Francisco State for my undergrad. I grew up in Southern California, down in San Diego. And so I came up to San Francisco for college, which wasn't very far from Napa. And it was almost a weekly activity to go up to Napa. Because of course this was a very long time ago, back when you could go into the wine tasting rooms and it didn't really cost you anything. And, if you were cool, nobody really carded you. I probably shouldn't say that, but and that was how I first started discovering wine. But my love of French wine began probably around 1998 when I first discovered Kermit Lynch, who is sort of the granddaddy of French wine importers. And he used to throw these parking lot parties where you would go down and he'd have like some crazy music playing out in the parking lot and he'd be pouring 3 or 4 different wines and have some guy cooking something on a grill to have with it. And that was it for me. I was in. I was 100% in, and yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that there's like a parking lot hangout.
Yeah.
It's just like, because I think for a lot of people, when you make that association of French wine, it's just kind of like this prestige and everything like that, and you're just kind of like, yep, there's a Wendy's wrapper, and then here's this really beautiful French wine.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's really awesome. And then to fast forward a little bit, do you remember the moment when you thought to yourself, it was like, okay, like I'm doing this lawyer thing, I'm crushing it. I need to import French wine. Like, what was that moment like? Where did that happen?
Yeah, that's actually a great story. Okay, so we have these friends that live in France. They used to live in Bordeaux. Long story, but we're really close to them, and we went over to see them. It's Frank and Ségolène as the husband and wife, and they now have 5 kids, but at the time they had 4. And we went down to see them, and Frank, as a surprise, not really knowing my obsession with French wine, had set up just by chance a tour of a very small house, a small domain in Sauternes. And so we get into his like Scooby-Doo van, no joke. It had like a peace symbol on it, because they had all these kids. Like, it was fantastic. We're all 3 riding me. My husband and Frank are riding in the front because there's no room in the back because there's all this kid stuff in the back. And we go to down these crazy French country roads because, Bordeaux is not, it's not an area that a lot of people go to. And so it's not really overly tourist centered. It still feels very old, sort of French, especially outside of Bordeaux, the city of Bordeaux. Anyway, so we're going down these, crazy little roads, and we pull into this like roundabout, and he parks, and there's this little tiny shop that we go into, and in France, a lot of the towns will have a house of wine that is dedicated to the wine that comes from that region, right? Because wine is such a huge part of their culture and their identity. So this was a house of wine for Sauterne, but the owners, Christelle and her two brothers, also made wine, right? Chateau Cherchy, and then they named their Sauterne Chateau de Comarac, which is named after a local historical monument. Anyway, so we go in there, and I had already been a lawyer for a very, very long time. And I had already started to feel like I really needed a second act. You know, I love my job, don't get me wrong. I love being a lawyer, but it can be very emotionally exhausting. And it just felt like I had given everything that I had to that job for so long that I was ready to do something for me, because my law job is really about other people, right? It's like I give 100% of myself to my clients to help protect them, to fight for them, all of those things. Anyway, so we go into the shop, and I meet Christelle and Melanie, who was her like her store manager, kind of like her Girl Friday. It was only two people working in the shop, and it was really tiny. And we start talking, and we're trying all of these Sauternes. And I have to be honest, before this, I didn't really care for Sauterne, because I was one of those people that was like, oh, I don't really like sweet wine. You know what I mean? Like, whatever. And, but Sauterne is a thing all to itself, right? It is glorious when it is done well. It can be so seductive. And a modern Sauterne isn't like cloyingly sweet. It doesn't make your jaw, ache. It's just really complex and beautiful. So anyway, so Christelle and I were talking, and she was saying to me, they always wanted to break into the US market, but they needed somebody in the US that wanted to bring them over, right? And without somebody like that, then they can't really break into the US market. And so of course, immediately the little wheels just started spinning. And I start thinking to myself, I'm really good at solving problems. I know how to do paperwork, sort of trained to know how to do paperwork. So I don't say anything to her, but we finish our visit, we have this wonderful time, we exchange emails and all this great stuff. And it was obvious this family had been making wine for 5 generations. And it's fantastic. Like, it's a real labor of love for them. Anyways, so we finish our visit, we go home, and I don't know what we were doing, but one morning I'm sitting on the couch having coffee, and I turned to my husband and I said, so, I think I want to import French wine. And my husband was like, I'm sorry, you want to do what? you want to do what? And I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to look into it. And so I just started doing the research, and here we are 4 or 5 years later.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And for the importing, how many states are you working with right now? Is it just California, or?
Yes, and honestly, it's just a sort of a money issue, because every state costs money to get licensed to be able to sell in that state.
Right.
And, the company's pretty small. We're really focused on Northern California. We have a little bit of Southern California, but, I have a pretty small book. It's maybe 14 wineries. It's not very big. And I don't bring in every wine by every winery. I pick out the wine that I feel the most passionate about, and they all have to be from a small family vineyard. They have to have high quality standards. They don't have to be biodynamic, but they do have to be sustainable. They have to be concerned about the environment. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. But so for right now, it's just California. I am open to expanding to other states, but I wanted to get sort of on our feet here in California before I made that jump.
Totally. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we deal with a lot of, with our import side of our company, it can be a logistical nightmare. So
right.
Totally get it. So, a lot of people, when they start importing, like kind of like their passion projects and stuff like that, they tend to be like pretty niche, right? And they find some stuff that's like truly unique. But, you're importing from what most people consider like the mecca of the wine world. And like when people like, the association of wine is usually French first and then everything else after. And so I'm curious, is working with these smaller brands easier or harder because you have a lot that are from France?
So I don't have anything to compare it to. So I can't
Fair.
say that it's easier or harder, but I will say this. The whole idea behind the business was to help the small family winery, right? That's my first wines that I brought in were from Christelle and her family. I brought in their Sauterne, and then I brought in 100% Semillon wine from them. It's all about giving those small families the opportunity to have a crack at a bigger market. It's a big part of what drives it. And also it makes me feel good to help them. I like being able to represent the small families. So, and in that aspect, it's easy because I'm dealing directly with the winemaker. The only time that it gets kind of tricky is that sometimes the older generations, they don't speak English as well, and my French is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, especially because I don't go over enough. But I'm working on remedying that. Well, maybe later after COVID. Anyways, so I find that working directly with the families, you know, it's easy to talk about price. It's easy to talk about what wines. And the French are really interesting. They don't get their feelings hurt. Like if you don't like their wine, they don't care. Like you don't have to be like, oh, well, this wine is really lovely, but it's just not quite right for me. You can just tell them like, you know, it's just not, that's not for me. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, which is great.
Yeah, that's something that I've gotten a lot more used to with Europeans is they tend to be there's a little less BS when you're working with them. That does kind of lead, you know, again, perfectly into the next question, which is, you know, you talked about being a problem solver and being very adept at paperwork, but ultimately at the end of the day, like you have to convince Christelle's family to let you do it. And then from there, you convince other families to let you do that. And I just wonder, like, how the hell do you do that with like really no experience and just kind of like, well, I read some books, you guys, and I Googled some stuff and I think I got it, you know? What was that conversation like? And then how is that, how has it grown? Like, is it word of mouth? So those questions, how have you built this?
Well, okay. So Christelle that was an easy relationship, right? We had already established a relationship. I reached out to her when I started sort of looking into it. They were super excited about the idea of it. Now there's no loss to the family. So the way that it works out is that I purchase the wine upfront. So, you know, there's a whole lot of behind the scenes. You have to get the labels approved. You've got to get that the winery is approved by the FDA. Like you have to fill out it's a whole bunch of crap. Anyways, so, but I help them do all of that. And then I buy the wine up front. Like I pick the wine, you know, I pick the vintage, they do the labels, I submit them, I get them approved, and then I order whatever I order, typically like 600 bottles, like a pallet at a time. If things are, you know, if I think it's going to do well. And then, so there's no loss to the family. So that I think helps in the conversation. It's not like I'm doing it on oh, hey, give me your wine. And if I sell some, I'll send you some money. You know, it's not like that. It wouldn't be fair to them. It would kind of go against the whole idea behind the company, which is to help them have an experience, have a broader market. So Christelle was easy. And then we went back like a year later after we had met with Christelle and after I'd done a bunch of research and started the process of looking into how to get the import permit and the licensing and all that good stuff. And we just toured Bordeaux for like 10 days. And we just went from winery to winery. And I had sort of a list of what I was looking for, what it was really important to me. And, you know, the small family wineries, it's easy. You walk in, the winemaker's behind the, not the desk, but the bar. Yeah. They love their product, right? To them, it's everything. They pour their sweat and, you know, their blood, sweat, and tears into it. And then, so I'm just a big customer for them. Right. And I think a lot of French wineries want to be able to export to the US. They think of the US as a good market, right? We buy a lot of French wine in the US. So it's not a terribly difficult sale to make, like to convince them to trust me, because I can refer them to the other wineries I've worked with. And in that first go, I just my primary goal was to find wines that I liked, that I thought would be palatable to the U.S. palate, that were from small family wineries and produced high quality wine. Like those were the things that were most important to me. And when I would find a winery, like, for example, I have a wine from Lalande de Pomerol. I have two from there. And one is called La Ferote, which is a play on the term for brother in French. And it's owned by two brothers, but it's been owned by the same family for generations. Anyways, but the dad had two sons. And so he changed the name to La Ferote. And, we go in there, I'm talking with the winemaker. He had just come in off of his, off of the fields, plowing the fields, like to get everything ready. And we're trying the different vintages, and it was a delicious wine. And I said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Would you guys be interested? And of course, they were like, yes, that sounds wonderful. If you can help us figure out the paperwork part of it. And yeah, it was kind of easy.
Well, and, I think you got to give yourself a little bit more credit just on the outsider looking in, because for sure the transaction takes place, right? So the family's happy. They're like, dope, we just sold a pallet of wine.
Right.
That's a win.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, you have to trust that person to go and tell that story, and you don't want the wrong message to be conveyed and stuff like that. So I think paperwork wise and the exchange of money, like, sure makes it easy, but I do think that there's like an element of like, okay, yeah, we actually like this person also. We think that she can convey that story properly. Because, you don't, if you want to get to that market, you don't want to go with someone who sucks. So,
right.
That would not
right.
be good. So just an outside observer, like, oh, you could probably give yourself a little bit more credit there.
Thanks.
So, and then as we've mentioned a couple of times before, you do still have your day job, and I was wondering, and you kind of already touched on it a little bit, but has your experience as a lawyer like helped you in this arena, like outside of the paperwork and stuff like that? Is there any other situations you can think of kind of being like, oh, this is nothing compared to what I saw in court today, or something like that? I don't know if there's any scenarios that come to mind.
Yeah, no, actually it's shockingly, the skills that I learned as a trial lawyer, because that's what I do, is I do criminal defense, but I'm a trial lawyer. I go to trial all the time. Those skills, being able to stand up in front of 12 people and explain to them somebody else's story, because that's exactly what I do. I represent the defendant. So I have to convey to that jury what is so special or unique or important about that client to get them to do what I want them to do. And that transitions really well, right? Because it makes it, everybody's nervous when they walk into an account for the first time. Like when you walk into a restaurant, you want to try to get an appointment to sell them wine. But the experience of over 20 years of doing what I do makes it easier for me, I think, to go into situations cold. It also has helped me learn skills that allow me to convey the family's story and their personalities. And I love my families. Like, there's a real connection to my clients, to my families. And so it's easy for me to convey how great the wine is, because I really believe that. I'm not just going in there to like sell them a pile of crap. Like, I really believe in the wine that I bring over. And so it makes it easier, I think, to be able to do that. And I think the fact that I've been a trial lawyer for so long has helped me, increase my skills in a way that allows me to talk to people easily, or, convey information in a hopefully persuasive way.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm sure that you kind of have like, the ability to really have that attention to detail and stuff. When it comes to importing wines, is there a part of the process that you look at, and if you could snap your fingers and change, you would immediately because it's just inefficient? Is there anything you can think of that?
Oh, yes, 100%. So when I buy wine, right? Okay. So when the winery gets it all ready, they put it together on the pallet, and it gets picked up by I pay for the shipping, right? Of course, right. So the shipper picks it up. It is undoubtedly at least 6 weeks, sometimes 8, before the wine actually gets to my warehouse, because it's got to get to the warehouse in France, who's then going to put it on a ship, and then the ship is going to come all the way down, and up to Oakland, right? Or if it goes to New York, then it's got to get trucked across the states. It is incredibly maddening. The process of getting it to me from the winemaker to me. Not to call on anybody in our group here, but Russell can attest to how many times I've called him, cussing out the shipper, the truckers. I had one shipment show up and the truck, I pay extra for it to be refrigerated, because you want the wine to be kept in the best possible condition. I mean, it's a big investment, right, and blah, blah, blah. When the truck showed up one time, it wasn't even refrigerated. And I lost my mind on the poor trucker, who of course was just delivering the wine. And he's like, I don't know what to tell you. I was like, you stay right here. I went inside and I started calling the shipper. I lost my mind. So that I would change that in a second. And there's no good answer to it, because if I fly it over, it costs me a fortune, and nobody can, you'd have to put that cost into the wine, and nobody's going to pay that much for the wine. Yeah. Part of what makes my company so, I think, accessible is that I shoot for a certain price point so that the wine is accessible to people. They can try something new without it breaking their bank. And if I had to fly it over, I couldn't do that. And, it's just,
yeah. I'm glad that I really struck a nerve there. That's what this is kind of all about. And I do have to say, like, the first time that I bought some of your wines after meeting you, Chris rung me up at Good Bottle, and I was like, "That's it?" And he's all, "Yeah, man." And that was when I was like, "Dude, don't give me any like homie discount or anything like that, like, because you're new, you need this money."
Yeah.
And he was just like, "Yeah, no, they're super approachable." And I think that's one of those kind of like mythos about French wine, is that it does seem inaccessible, right?
Yes.
So when I saw some of the prices, I was like, "This is awesome." And then of course you follow up with actually drinking it, and it's Thanks. Great. And I bring home a lot of really weird stuff to my wife, whether it's the spirits I work with or even the wines that I work with. I mean, we do a lot of super, super crazy stuff, and it's very, very hit and miss with her. All of your stuff has been a hit, so you have the full approval, which she can be pretty picky. So
no, that's awesome.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say, I think that's, there's two reasons for that. One, I think because I'm dealing with small family wineries who want a chance at this market, I get a good price, which is lovely. But the second part of that is, I'm almost like working against myself, because people do assume French wine is going to cost a lot of money. And because my wine is not expensive, people think it's not going to be high quality. Right. So it's like, but once I get people to try it, if people will try the wine, they're in. Like, they're like, "Oh, that's great, I love it, whatever, sign me up for some more." But getting them to try it is, that's been an uphill battle. Like in just the regular consumer, not the restaurants. That's easy. You make an appointment, you go down, you see them. But like trying to generate wine club people or whatever, it's harder. But I love that you like it.
Oh, we love it. I mean, and Yay. It's one of my personal goals is to definitely, because I've always enjoyed wine, but wine has always been an escape from my job, even though I work in alcohol. Because the wines that I work with, like, I've come to find out they're actually really awesome. Like, we have some really cool stuff from Georgia, we have cool stuff from Lebanon, but
cool.
But that wasn't part of like my normal thing beforehand.
Do you sell, not to get off track here, do you sell to the PIP? Do you sell wines to the PIP room?
No.
Oh no, Amy, you don't sell. I just tried a Georgian wine for the first time, and I didn't even know Georgia made wine, which is embarrassing. But it was fantastic.
Yeah, they actually have paperwork that says they invented it. So it's been around for a long time. But I was in the same boat as you. It's not the most well-known stuff, but then once you start to learn their history and stuff, you're like, oh my God, like they have been doing this forever. And there's just some really fun books I can send to you that talk about it and hook you up with some of our Georgian wine house people. They're amazing. And they're fanatics about it, right? Because again, it's this niche thing that they've just turned into psychopaths about. So
Love it.
it's
Those are
cool.
my
But
people.
yeah, they're really, really fun. So, before COVID hit, the only thing that anybody was talking about in terms of our industry was the tariffs and
Yes.
how they hit us. I mean, and again, there is the lost episode of the Good Bottle podcast, which I co-host with Chris Sinclair, where you did do an amazing interview, and that I was just like, we got to run this back somehow. But at the time, and we're still not great at it, but we have no idea how to work audio, so it just doesn't sound great. But the content was amazing, and
Thanks.
so that has not gone away. It's still very much so a part of what you're having to deal with every single day. The difference is nobody's talking about it because there's a global pandemic. And so I'm curious, when that stuff happened, I mean, what was your first initial reaction? I mean, was there any fear that you're like, I just won't be able to do this business anymore? And then
Yes.
how have you, I guess, pivoted and are continuing to make it happen, even though that we're in like super weird times, but with that increase. So if you could just kind of go through that a little bit.
Yeah, so there was actually, two different tariffs, right? The first one, which is still in effect, was the 25% increase, right? And for people that don't know, it's the importer that pays that, right? Like I pay it for it to, like it, the winemaker doesn't pay it, the winery. I pay all of those taxes and tariffs and all that garbage. So the whole argument that it's impacting the French, right? It's ridiculous. It really impacts the small businesses here in the States, well, or the big businesses too. The big businesses, I think, are easier to consume that price hike and put it somewhere else. But anyway, so the first tariff was 25%, and that's still in effect. And that's on everything that is not everything, but for me, everything that is not sparkling wine. And, it stinks because what that basically means is I pay one price to the family, and then the wine gets here, and then I pay another price to the federal government so that I can actually get my wine so that I can sell it. But it is just the cost of doing business, and it just ends up being translated to the price that people have to pay for the wine. The second tariff, which would have been deadly, like I couldn't have survived it, and I don't think a lot of people could, was the 100% tariff that they were trying to push through, including on sparkling wine.
Yeah.
And that, thank God, did not go through. That would have killed me. I mean, a 25% is a huge increase, but you can deal with it. Like it hurts, but it doesn't kill the business. 100%, nobody's going to pay those kind of prices for. The only wine that would be left would be from the very biggest producers, and then nobody could have it. Like not like we couldn't enjoy it. Like who could afford that?
Right. Yeah. So it's just obviously an awesome thing that did not go through at all.
Yeah.
So I mean, now when you're looking at it, and I'm also curious about, you buy these pallets from the families, and we've had kind of these hiccups, quite honestly, whether it's the pandemic, where it's the tariffs or anything like that. As the importer, are you ever getting pressure from the families to sell more or anything like that? I mean, has it gotten to that point, or kind of being like, oh, Kelly, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? Like, someone reached out to us and they want this. Can you get it to them? Do you ever, does that part of the relationship exist? Because I know it does for us, but as a distributor, you kind of expect it, right?
Right.
And even to a certain degree, like we get it on our import side too, but there tends to be a little bit more understanding there.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just wondering, like with these smaller families, is it still just a lot of gratitude, or are there these expectations that you guys have for each other?
Yeah, that's a great question. To be honest, I have to say that if there are expectations, they have not been conveyed to me. So I have had some of the wineries that are a little more bigger production that have tried to put, not pressure, but sending me new vintages on wines. But if I don't like them, I don't pick them up. And because they're French, I just say to them, hey, look, like I have one winemaker in Bordeaux that I really enjoyed the first 3 shipments that I got from her. And then her next vintages, she kind of was following Robert Parker and started over oaking her wine. And I don't like oak on my wine. Like, don't get me wrong, oak is important. It plays an important part. It can really help make a wine go from, next level. But it can also ruin a wine. Like, I don't want to drink oak juice, right? That doesn't interest me. I'm
Right.
really I'm really about the terroir and what the grape is showing me and all of those kinds of things. And I just told her, I was like, sorry, I thought somebody was at my door. It's the wind. I'm in my living room.
No worries.
I just told her, I'm sorry, I'm not buying this vintage. And it's been, like, I didn't buy 17 or 18 or 19 of her whites, because I guess she felt like she was going to get a bigger market doing that with the oak. And I find them not interesting, and I don't want to bring over wine that's not interesting. And, I'm sure she didn't love it, but she still does business with me. So
Yeah. What a weird situation to be in. Where you're like, no, I don't want your stuff anymore.
yeah, it's awful. It's totally awful. Sorry. So I'm home, and my cat apparently knocks on the door when he needs to be let in.
It's okay. It's part of the realism of Drew's virtual happy hour,
Exactly.
It's all good. I've had, like, my daughter crash these meetings before. We've had some of the guests have their kids crash the meetings. I mean, ultimately at the end of the day, like, this stuff is just about hanging out with each other and having some good conversation and just trying to feel just like a little bit normal. And, your cat knocking on the door, it might not be normal, but it's definitely
it's normal in my house.
That's exactly it. Yeah. Okay. So I want to read you a couple different things, and this is a new segment of Drew's virtual happy hour. And I asked some of your customers what sold them on LBV wines. Okay.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Russell, I'm sorry, it was not you. That was not one of the answers given, but I'm sure you contributed. But and they're really short, so it's not like really with it. But I was like, I asked a couple people. I was like, hey, what made you bring in LBV wines? So one of the answers was how consistently dope they were. So that was one of the ones we got. And then the other one was, I love her collection and her story, and she has my favorite champagne producer, and it just went on and on and on, and I don't want to read all that. So
yay.
In a world that is hyper competitive, and these people who I asked, I have a tremendous amount of respect for, especially their palates and how many people they say no to. I mean, how do you think you're able to push this through to those people? I mean, because it is, I mean, again, like, you have dope stuff. They love your collection. They love your story and things like that. But I mean, is there any other, like, secrets of the trade that you're just kind of like, hey, because for a lot of people who do this, it is their full-time job. That's just not the case for you. So to be able to wear multiple hats, I mean, just, wondering, like, what else is, when you're preparing to go into a spot, I mean, what's the mindset? What's the strategy? And then how do you, I mean, it doesn't ever go to plan, but, like, when you try to, execute things, like, what kind of goes into that?
Wow. Okay. I think, like, not to sound, I don't know, what you see is what you get with me, right? Like, and I think that's a part of what works so well for me, is that I'm not trying to, like, game people. Like, the wine is what it is, and the wine is really high quality. And so I think that it helps, because when I go in, I don't even really push the stories. Like, I have them. I can tell you all about the families. I can tell you how I met, Mark Spitz, and we bring in his Pinot Gris and his Riesling and his Cremant. I could tell you this wonderful story about him and his family and how we got to see the vineyards and all these lovely things. But usually what I do is I check out, like, if it's a restaurant or a wine place, I look at what it is they already carry. I look at, like, if it's a restaurant, what kind of food they they have on their menu. And I try to think of what wines in my portfolio would best fit their needs. And so I might suggest those at the beginning, and I try not to show my whole book at once because it overwhelms people. Nobody is, right? Exactly. Like you show like 3, maybe 5 at the most, right? But like 3 to 4 wines, and and I try to be receptive to what it is that the person's telling me. And sometimes it's not the first time you go in. Sometimes it's not the second time. Sometimes you just got to keep knocking on that door, and don't be a jerk if they say no. Like if they say no, you're like, I get it. Like maybe it's not the right time, or maybe this wine you weren't feeling this wine today. I mean, I don't know. I guess it helps that it's my other job, because it is it's not my livelihood. I mean, I would love for it to be my livelihood. I wish it was all that I was doing, but I think it helps that it's not, because like, for example, like through this, right, the COVID stuff, all my restaurant business is gone. And understandably so. And the last thing I'm going to do is pressure like any of the restaurants about old bills or any of that garbage, because, they're dealing with their own stuff. And so, it helps that I have another job that pays my bills, and I can just kind of ride this wave, and hopefully we will get through this, and then things will go back a little bit to normal. I mean, hopefully.
Yeah, it's certainly a delicate situation, because again, it's something that we had to deal with. And when you are a small business, like you're hurting too,
Right.
And so it's like, but if you can, I know asking for checks has been the worst part of my job always, and even more so the past 8 weeks, without question. So, not everybody's going to have the means to travel to France or to do, or maybe ever import their own wine, So I always like to ask people is, for people who eventually listen to this and the ones that are on now, what would you suggest is like a really great way to learn about French wine? Like, are there any books out there? Like I mean, I know you do a blog as well, and you have like guest writers too, which is actually really solid, and your website is beautiful. So everybody should check that out. I'll link it later, but
Thanks.
I mean, are there any things that you would suggest to people who want to learn more about French wine?
Yeah, honestly, I would say take a class, right? Go, like, I mean, of course, just drink. Like, okay, let me back up and say that in a better way.
There's there was so much rapid fire.
Right, exactly. Like, okay, like, so if you, the best way to expand your palate is to try new stuff, right? People get stuck in these ruts where they're like, oh, I only like Rumbauer Chardonnay, or I only drink red, right? Like, it's garbage. You don't know what you like if you don't try it. It's perfectly acceptable to pour something and be like, you know what, this isn't my favorite, right? It's no problem. But you tried it. You don't know what, like, I'll give you a good example. So I have that 100% Semillon that I brought in from Christelle's family, right? I still have it. It has changed so delightfully as it's aged, right? Like, it's been sitting in my warehouse for a couple of years. And a lot of people think, oh, white wine, if it's got any age on it, it's no good. This wine is so incredibly killer. And I'm just, I'm so in love with this wine. But you've got to convince people to try it. But once people try it, they're like, oh, this is fabulous. Just be open to new experience. And if you really like wine, like if you enjoy wine and you want to know more about it, take a class, you can do wine tasting online, which is not as much fun. You could, when wineries reopen, you could go to the, wineries often will do stuff. You can sign up for their wine clubs or go to their events. Do a certification class. I know that sounds crazy, but like YSET or what is the other one? The Master Court of Sommeliers.
Yep.
It's really fun. And like you get to experience all these great wines. It can be intimidating. Wine dorks can be a little intimidating sometimes, with I smell a lullaberry, like whatever, right? But just, that's my best advice, is to just keep drinking, try new stuff. Don't be afraid of it.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so true. Anytime I hear like, oh, I don't like that, I'm like, then you haven't had the one for you yet,
That's right.
There's so many, varietals out there, that there's just, and so many production methods that could affect that. So that's really great. And definitely the virtual stuff is not as much fun, but hey, we're getting through it. I know I definitely want to get back to normal, because like if
right.
For everybody out there, like,
you froze on me.
Oh, can you hear me? We're good?
Yes, yes. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yes.
I was just going to say that your Instagram is a great follow too, because you do a lot of like really cool tastings and stuff. So if anybody wants to
Thanks.
live vicariously, through Kelly, that's a really good one to check out, because it definitely
Thanks.
gives you FOMO.
Thank you very much. That's really nice. I'm actually not to be a hog, but can I give a plug?
Plug away. That's what this.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So not this Friday, but next Friday, the 22nd, I will be doing a Instagram live wine tasting where I will be posting how people can buy the 2 wines that we'll be tasting so they can get them delivered to their house. And then they can go on Instagram live with me and try the wines, and we'll talk about it. I'd love to be able to do it in a way like this, like the Zoom, where people can talk and do all of that. But I'm going to try to keep with this Instagram live for the moment, just because I think it's an easier way for people to do it without feeling like put on the spot. Nobody wants to be called on, you know what I mean? Like they just want to try the
Yeah.
wine, and then if they want to say something, they can put it in the comments or.
Yeah. For sure. I think for myself, the reason that I ended up opting more for the Zoom side of it was because I wanted to be able to keep the content,
Yes.
That's been I
Smart.
think the big difference maker for me, because when I originally conceptualized this, I was like, oh, I get to do it on Facebook because, access and stuff like that. And then I was like, but then I won't have it anymore after, or it's like harder to get, and there's limits. Like Instagram has like an hour limit, and it's like, that's not enough. And I did do my first tasting on Friday, and admittedly it's a little awkward, because you're so used to reading the room,
Yes.
and you're kind of
Yes.
like, okay, Shelly's really digging this right now, I'm going to keep talking
Yeah.
about that, or
Yeah.
like, oh, they don't care about this appellation at all, like I'm going to move on. And so it's like it is a little awkward. And fortunately people's feedback was like no, you sounded fine. I was like, really? Because I felt weird the whole time. So
So Drew, was it with your job? Like, did you do it like for the distribution side, or how did you do
yeah.
the tasting?
Yeah. So what we ended up doing was, it was my second virtual tasting. It was the first one I hosted exclusively, and actually going through and explaining the stuff. But we sold 25 tickets, and it was in 1-ounce bottles. We then put, because roughly a 750 is going to give you 27 ounces, and so I am clumsy and I spill stuff. So I was like, I'll do 25 tickets, and then we filled up a bunch of bottles, sold tickets online, either hand delivered or shipped out from there. Had some issues with that too, which sucked. But
Yeah.
but it was cool, because then it was an opportunity to be like, okay, and then if you really like this stuff, you can go back to that website and buy more bottles. And I think
Oh, I
that's going to
love
be,
that.
yeah, it's going to be more of kind of what the norm is moving forward. So I'm just getting used to it. And I mean, I went and got a heat gun, so you could like put the plastic around the bottles too. Like it's legit. Like I
Oh,
didn't.
that's cool.
Yeah, so we're figuring it out, and it's I think it is going to be kind of how we have to do business moving forward, at least for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And people want the engagement, right?
Yeah.
And that's what, with a lot of the happy hours that I've seen outside of this now, because it's, when I started doing this 2 months ago, nobody was doing them, and now everybody's doing them. But they are starting to evolve, and I like the idea of having something that you can give to people that's like tangible, because yeah, sometimes just talking or listening to a conversation the whole time can get a little boring. And so now if we can start engaging people, because again, this is our reality. So I'm definitely in for that. Do we buy tickets through your website or the
No.
Wine's website, or are we going through a store?
Yes, no, it'll be through my website.
Okay, cool.
But I'm going to chat with you later about those 1-ounce bottles, because that's like a fantastic way you could, like that would be so fun, because then the feedback I heard about the last tasting was that people didn't want to open both bottles. Like I did 2 bottles because I thought that it would be more interesting to have 2 different wines to try.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, but people had reached back to me saying they didn't want to open both bottles because they didn't want to drink both bottles in one night.
Right.
So it would be so much more interesting to be able to offer several different kinds of wines. Like you could do a whole progression. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that idea.
don't get it twisted. It is a complete pain in the ass. Like it is
Oh yeah,
just like
yeah.
it is a labor of love. But so far the results from it have been encouraging and people really do want to do it. So we're
Cool.
doing we do 5 samples. So on Friday so last Friday I did agave. This Friday I have rum, and then on the 23rd I'm doing a whiskey one for
Oh,
45 people.
oh, that's
So
cool. I
yeah,
might sign up for that whiskey. I don't know anything about whiskey. It would be super fun to do a tasting.
yeah, I'll send you information. It's gonna be fun because it's actually an independent bottler, so you'll be exposed to a lot of different
Fun.
whiskeys from around the world.
Oh,
Okay, so enough plugging for my stuff, but yeah, definitely we'll get the links up and everything like that. Um, so Catherine has a question for you.
yes.
If I go to the bottle shop and say, "What do you have from LBV Imports?" Will they take me to your wine?
Yes, they will, for sure. You and the Good Bottle is fantastic. Like it's a great place, and they also have all sorts of really fun spirits. So you should go and check that out, anyways. But you can also go to my website, which is lbv-shop.com. And the Instagram, I noticed on an earlier question, she was asking what my Instagram account was, and I have to look it up because I
I
don't
think
know
it's
it off.
LBV-wine.
Yes, but it's no underscore LBV
Oh, underscore.
underscore wine. Um, yeah, man. And I got to tell you, the social media is tricky, right? Like that is a whole other thing, trying to create interesting, relevant content that people want to look at.
I think it's more of just like a consistency thing, and then having like a voice that makes sense. Like one thing that always bothers me about people's social medias is, on one hand they'll be like, "Here's me hanging out and drinking wine and stuff like that." You're like, "That's really cool," and then the next statement is just kind of like some political thing, and you're just kind of like, you're like, "Whoa, the tone is way different on this one, and this
Yeah,
is not what I signed up for."
yeah, totally.
I think yours has been pretty consistent. It definitely conveys like good timing and stuff like that, and
Thanks.
all that. Okay, so now I'm gonna hit you with some rapid fire questions.
Okay, I'm ready. Hit me.
All right, you win a case. What are you drinking in your portfolio?
Okay, is it a big case or is it a little case?
Big case. We're going
Like
we're
a
going for
big,
broke.
big case? Okay, well then of course I'm having the lapel.
Okay, lapel.
Lapel,
Boom.
it's 100% Pinot Noir, single vineyard vintage champagne from Roger Brunn. The champagne Roger Brunn, but it's the domain. The winemaker is actually Philippe, his son. It is by far the sexiest, most amazing champagne, and he is totally quirky French guy. He actually was at Good Bottle. We did an event at Good Bottle where Philippe came. It was right before New Year's.
Yeah.
And did you go to that, Drew?
I was gonna go to it, and then
Oh.
I hit up Chris, and I was like, "Hey, when was that event?" He goes, "It was last night." I was all, "Yeah, that's what it's like having a 2-year-old." All right,
Yeah,
cool.
exactly. Oh, well, that's all right. That's all right. He says he might come, he'll come back. He's super fun. He's really lovely. And he wears a beret and he is so old school French, man. And I'll tell you, he knows his stuff about how to make champagne. In fact, so he has one of those old school presses, they're round and the sides fall down and they gently crush the grapes, right?
Oh
Like
yeah,
it's not like the new stuff with the bladder, like it's an old school. And it takes a lot of skill to be able to use those. And he does that sort of pressing for some of the big houses in the Champagne region because he's so well respected. Anyways,
nice.
I drink the lapel. Sorry, I
Okay,
would drink the lapel.
okay, it's all right. It's all right. This, again, there's no structure here. Um, all right, a case doesn't go your way. What are you drinking?
Probably the Volnay from Domaine Perrin. I have 2 wines from Burgundy, one from Monthely and one from Volnay, and it's incredibly beautiful and luscious, and it's a premier cru, and it's the kind of thing that makes everything a little better.
Okay. Um, if someone was to buy only 3 bottles from you,
Mm.
what bottles do you want them to buy?
Ooh, okay. Can you tell me a little bit more about them? Like, is it
They
there a
have
price limit?
they have no idea what they're doing, but they're willing to treat themselves.
Oh, fabulous. Okay, so, okay. Oh, see, it's so tricky because, you know, what somebody that is a real wine person is going to love is going to be really different than somebody that doesn't know anything about wine.
Right.
Somebody that's like a brand new wine person and they're just kind of opening their eyes to wine.
Yeah.
If it's that kind of person, I'm probably going to give them the Pinot Gris from Spitz and Fee.
Okay.
It's luscious and beautiful and so good. And it's a white wine. And then I would get them a sparkling, because they're like new to wine. I'd probably give them the Tradition by Jacques Copin. That's 90% Pinot Meunier and 10% Pinot Noir, which is a really unusual blend, but it's really full on the palate, and the tiny bubbles. People just really love it. It's a real winner. And it's kind of right, like middle palate, like everybody likes it. And then I'd have to go with a red, right? You'd have to go with a red. So one that is, are they from California?
Yeah.
Okay. So if they're from California, I would do the Chateau Leon, the Red Grave, because I think that wine blend is closest to California Reds. It's a Cabernet Merlot blend. It's really yummy and delicious and wonderful. But I think it's going to be the thing that people would most, they're going to enjoy it the most if they've mostly been exposed to California wine. If they're from somewhere else and they're not really California wine drinkers, then I would probably go with something more earthy that's going to give them a little more complexity and might be like, ooh, that was interesting.
Okay, cool. I was going to ask you, like, they're from Georgia. What's the answer now?
yeah, exactly. Georgia, like the state of Georgia, like the state of Georgia. Oh, dude. Well, still the Pinot Gris for sure, because that, and probably still the Champagne, but the red, I would mix it up. Georgia. And see, that's the thing. Like, what do people in Georgia like? Like, they're with sweet tea, right? They're going to go for something that's going to have a little more fruit on it. So I'd probably pick something that, probably my L'Enfant, which is kind of a big wine from the Rhone, actually the Luberon, which is right near the Rhone Valley, and that's a big fruity wine. And I think like people, that it's easy to like that wine.
People from Georgia will dig that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
That'll be our, you know what? I'm going to help you. We're going to Georgia next. Okay.
Exactly.
Northern California, Georgia. Those are the two markets that we're tackling.
That's right.
So also, on your Instagram and stuff like that, like you do get to go to like a lot of really cool events and stuff like that. Has there ever been a moment when you've been starstruck by someone that you've seen in the wine industry?
Oh, I hate to admit it, but it hasn't happened yet.
Oh.
Well, okay. So here, let me tell you. So this doesn't really count because this was before I was a French wine importer. Okay. But before I was a French wine importer, I got to meet Anthony Bourdain, like up close and personal, like got to meet him face to face. That I was super starstruck. Like that was like his pictures on my fridge, just because I was just like, I probably am the most starstruck I've ever been by somebody sort of in the food and wine. I mean, he's not wine, but
still, I mean, it counts. I'm lucky I get to go to a lot of cool events, and there's still moments that I geek out on that I'm like, nobody understands why this is cool. And actually, that's like when like the cool thing about this, the happy hour, is that I've just got to talk to all these people that I've respected for years and either have met or briefly met, and they've all said yes. So it's been really cool.
Awesome. That's cool.
Okay, and now I have one final question for you, and then we usually open it up to people. So if anybody has any questions, you can either unmute yourself or you can type into the chat. I know we've got a couple already, but and then if not, no worries either. But my new question that I've been asking people, and I really like it, is eventually when your memoir comes out, what will be the title of your book?
Appetite for Adventure.
Appetite for Adventure. Love it. That's the quickest answer by far. It's like you've thought about it. Everyone else has like struggled quite a bit for it. Appetite for Adventure. Awesome. Well, that's all the questions that I have for you. Does anybody have any questions that they would have this opportunity to take advantage of while we're all locked in our homes and have Kelly's attention?
3 wines for an experienced drinker.
Yeah.
Hi, Catherine. Yes. Okay. So your sister, can I ask a little bit more? Does she like a particular style of wine? Does she like white wines, red wines? Is she more fruity? I don't even know if you would know this, but. She likes red. Okay, cool. So then I would definitely recommend, like if you wanted to kind of surprise her with something that would be really cool, I would actually recommend the Lapel by Roger Brunn, because it is 100% Pinot Noir, and people that love red wine, that is a red wine drinker's champagne. It smells like Pinot, it tastes like Pinot, but it's got all the effervescence of champagne. That's one I would think about. Yeah, surprise is good. The other thing I would say, so Burgundy, I love Pinot Noir. And I have this really sexy little Burgundy from Montaly, same winemaker as the Volnay, and that's really fruity and lovely and delicious. And your sister would probably really dig that. Trying to think. So not French. I have one small family that I bring in from Italy. It's a brother-sister team, and they're from the Tuscany region, and they're really lovely. And they make a Chianti in an old Governo style, which is this style that the Etruscans used to use, which is, it's 90% Sangiovese, and then they take the Cabernet Sauvignon and they dry it on the vine, and then they ferment them together, and it produces this really delicious Chianti wine that is not grippy. You know, sometimes Chianti has that, can be a little much. This is really smooth and delicious. I would recommend that because it's done in a style that nobody can get really anywhere, and it's delicious.
Awesome. Let's see. Do you have the triple brie? Did you see that?
No, I didn't see that.
What do you suggest pairing with a triple cream brie?
Ooh. Oh, okay. Yum first. Okay, so like a classic, like I would probably go the Pinot Gris from Alsace. That would be delicious. I would, you could do so many things. The Cherchy is really round on the palate and would go well with that. Champagne's always good. Not all champagnes, don't get me wrong. Champagne is like any other wine. It has different flavor profiles, but maybe I would go with the tradition. But my first instinct would be the Pinot Gris. And the last one, Catherine, the name of the last Italian wine was, it's Colli Amari, and it's called Governo del Uso. Let me make sure that I'm saying that right, that I got the right name. Hold on. It's there's two wines that I have from Colli Amari, and it's the Chianti, not the other one. I can type it in here in 1 second. Sure, it's the Governo del Uso. I just don't know if there's another part to that. No. You can ask me another question while I'm looking for it. I can multitask.
Can you tell us about your wine club?
Yes, I can, and I would love to. It is, okay, so it is.
While you're doing it, too.
Oh, yeah, it's Governo al Uso Toscano. I'll write that down for you. I knew I was missing a word. Toscano. Oops. So the wine club is only $50 every quarter. So it's only every 4 months. I'm sorry, every 3 months. And I do 2 wines, and the wines either value over $50. Like they always value over $50. The only time I do a single wine is in January. I always do a champagne. It's kind of great because the champagnes can be, anywhere from, $65 to $90. And we send out a champagne in January kind of to start the new year. And then I try to do newsletters that talk about, I always share the stories about the family behind the wine, food and wine pairings that go with the wines. It's a really great way to try new wines, and it's really affordable.
Nice. Greg wants to know, will you leave the law for wine?
In a second. I would do it in a second, Greg. If I could make enough money to pay my bills, I would totally do it. That's the goal. It's probably a couple years away. Though I just had a neat experience that just happened, and I don't know how I'm going to work this in, but I had a customer reach out to me and ask me to curate 3 different boxes for 3 different people. And she gave me sort of profiles about what everybody liked. That was so fun to curate those boxes. And I would love to be able to do some sort of service like that. Like to be able to go over to France and find wines for people, like people in particular. Oh, I really like these kind of wines, and then bring back particular kinds of wine for people. That would be such a fun thing to do. I don't know how I'm going to do that, but that's in my future plans.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, I think it's, right now more than ever, you got to get creative and try new things to make this business work. So
Right.
Cool. Do we have any other questions or anything? And if people want to get a hold of you, Kelly, what's the best route to go?
Well, you could message me through the website. You could direct message me from Instagram or Facebook. Or my email address is Kelly, Kelly @lbv-shop.com. And, I'm happy to give people suggestions, help answer questions. Even if you don't end up buying any wine, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I love to talk about wine. So
good. Awesome.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Kelly, it has been an absolute pleasure to talk with you. I had high expectations for this conversation, and you did not disappoint at all. I would really look forward to drinking more of your wine and going to one of your really cool events. So thank you.
Thanks, Drew.
For doing this. Everybody, thank you for coming tonight. Again, this is just about giving yourself a little bit of an escape, enjoying ourselves for an hour, ish, and drinking some good stuff. So stay healthy out there, stay safe, and I look forward to drinking with all of you very soon. So cheers, everybody.
Cheers. Thank you, Drew. Bye.